Welcome back to the Backyard Professor Responds videos. I have read another one of the books that I bought at Contact in the Desert. This one by Major Paul H. Smith, The Essential Guide to Remote Viewing. Really interesting book. Now, there's a lot of misconceptions about remote viewing, and I've had most of them. This book is kind of a very nice corrective to those of us who prejudge a subject, and there's plenty of us out there in the world that do that. Notice I am including myself, because I have somewhat, and he goes into the details of this, very nice. He shows how remote viewing is not telepathy, it is not witchcraft, it is not magic, and interestingly enough, it is something that all humans have the ability to do. We just aren't aware of it. And I thought, that's kind of interesting. Now, I've got some good friends who have told me that they have done remote viewing. And I have not scoffed at it, but I have not pursued it. I have not really. This is the first book I've ever read on this subject. It's not a super in-depth book. It's 200 and I read it today. Between this morning waking up extra early, today at noon at work, and tonight it's 300 pages. It's big print, so it's not too difficult to get through. It was so interesting. I read it straight through. He does present a couple of test cases to show that it is actually real, and they are very remarkable. And then he explains how we can learn remote viewing. And of course, the best way is with a guide, with someone who will help us study remote viewing. But if we can't do it that way, there are certain types of techniques we can use in order to at least get a start. Remote viewing is not predicting the future. Let me make that perfectly clear. That is something that I somewhat misunderstood. He clarifies that. I'm not going to go into the details at this time. I will have Paul Smith on my show soon, I hope. We'll work something out. I want to basically say I loved his chapter. Interestingly, now the case studies are extremely interesting, where the remote viewers in the government and military first reviewed a building called, what was it, 402 or 204, where they remote viewed what was going on in this gigantic building that the Russians had built, and they wanted to know what was going on in this building in Russia. And there's several of the remote viewing drawings that he shows, which was really kind of cool, about the inside of the building and the exterior of the building. The Russians were building, and this building was hundreds of yards away from any kind of water, and that's what was confusing the intelligence agencies. There's different satellite pictures of the building from above and to the side, but it's a ginormous building, and they wanted to know what in the hell is going on inside that building. The remote viewers did several sessions to try to find out what this building was all about, way back in 1970s. when they described what they were seeing, the military just said, "Get out of town. There is no way you can be right. It is impossible. The Russians would not waste their time doing this." And in every single instance, the remote viewers were right about what they said. Building 402, I believe it is. The Russians built the singular largest nuclear warhead carrying submarine in history at that point. And they put the rockets on the front of the submarine. And there's a photo of that submarine when the Russians finally revealed it, and it scared the hell out of the U.S. military, but they could have had a year's advance notice had they paid attention to the remote viewers, because the remote viewers correctly identified what was happening. Now that is astonishing. And I mean, this thing, it was called the Typhoon, and this thing had incredible capacities. That picture right there with all those little circles are how many rockets of nuclear weapons this ginormous submarine could carry. And there it is near the great big battleship. And he explains how it absolutely terrified the military. So he shows some very interesting historical ideas on the remote viewing that I thought was quite interesting. He talks a lot about the different personalities of the remote viewers in the military, he being one of them, and essentially how it works, what you can do to get started, various different peoples and their attempts at remote viewing. It's never 100%. But it does work. It can work between 60 to 80% of the time. You must practice it. It is not demon possession. It is not evil. It is not magic. It is not supernatural. And it is not done through brain waves either. I know I'm giving you a lot of negatives, but it's really interesting how he shares his information. The evidence for remote viewing right now, regardless of what James Randi ever said, is extremely strong, and he's got it in this book. And I mean, there's many other books that describe it too. But for a good primer, for a good first book, I would highly recommend this. Very, very readable. I was pleasantly surprised. I understood it. And I know literally nothing. There goes my neighbor who thinks he's a macho because he hot rods his truck up and down the road. Remote viewing is extremely useful, and it is an entirely natural ability that all men and women have. We just don't know it. And that was a surprise. Wow. Okay. Very interesting. And he describes how to do it. Now, the chapter that I would like to review with him, because this was my favorite part of the book, is where he does address, what chapter is it? He addresses both chapter 13, critical thinking for skeptics and believers alike. Now, you pick up remote viewing, you begin to practice remote viewing. He warns you in the book that you will make mistakes, own up to them. It's not a crisis. All remote viewers make mistakes. That's not the issue. Don't stretch your evidence to try to match the target you were remote viewing in order to be correct. You get rid of your ego. If you're wrong, you're wrong. It's not a crisis. It's not a disaster. Jesus isn't coming tomorrow to sacrifice you for your sins because you made some mistakes. None of that noise. This is a practical guide on how to practice and how to improve, but you must keep a meticulous record of it, which makes a lot of sense. Having read the book, I get it. Yeah. And so he does see that because of their overzealousness, those beginners in remote viewing and those practitioners who want so badly for people to believe that they remote view sometimes stretch the results, and it gives remote viewing a bad name. And he cautions against doing that. You will be wrong many times, depending on how much you practice, but you will be right once you get the subtleties of the subtle energies and signals that you will pick up. Once you begin to discern how to feel that, you will get better and better, and your hits will be more than your misses. But it's not a 100% perfect prediction and prophecy type thing. No, none of that noise. Don't throw that noise into it. It's remote viewing. That's what it is. And he explains that very well. And I liked his down to earth explanation of what it is and what it isn't. Believers and skeptics alike have misunderstood it. Now, he comes from many decades of practicing it, and he has many friends who are remote viewers who also come with many decades of practicing it. And so it's a very helpful, it appears to me to be a very credible book on remote viewing. And I really enjoyed it. In the end there, and I'm not going to give this to you because if you really do want to do this, get his book. It's not expensive, but he does give you some websites he has developed that will give you credit for taking online remote viewing classes for free if you've read his book. And they're $45 classes otherwise, but you can get them for free for a few months of practicing. That way you actually do get into the meat of it a little bit, learning the basics, etc. And I really like the book. There's some names that are familiar. Hal Puthoff, Paul Smith, he's also familiar. So in this subject, he does mention Courtney Brown of Farsight, and he mentions his controversial aspects of tying in remote viewing with the ETs. And he does mention several other famous remote viewers and how they're viewed by the remote viewing community, etc. I honestly am but a babe in the woods with all of this stuff. I am exploring so many different angles because of my interest in the UFO drama and phenomenon, that this is what makes this whole subject so enjoyable to me, is I get to keep developing my awareness of other issues that can be involved with the UFO topic. And it is quite remarkable. And so it's a lot of fun for me. And so I enjoy sharing it with you. So that's my brief overview of Paul Smith's book. I will have him on the show so that we can get into it in more depth. So in the meantime, hit the like and subscribe button and share the video with people if you will. And I'd like to get to 900 million subscribers by the end of the year. Yeah, right. Even Mr. Beast doesn't have that many. Woohoo! He did become a billionaire off YouTube, though. That's pretty impressive. Come on, hand it to him. But he does some wild and crazy, zany stuff. I'm much more sedate and boring and just the facts, ma'am type of guy, trying to keep it real. And even that's changing, because when we say keep it real, remote viewing comes into this. When we say keep it real, are we trying to say keep it within the three-dimensional reality of which our Western science is based on? Because if that's keeping it real, we are actually cutting off our nose to spite our face, I am discovering. Reality is more than our three-dimensional reality. And so this idea of keeping it real has to expand, or you're cutting off part of the reality, so you're not keeping it real. So you can't just stick with science and logic in order to keep it real. Not anymore. We used to be able to, we thought, but then along came general and special relativity and quantum physics, and that just blew the hell out of reality with non-locality and quantum entanglement, which, because of the nature of this fascinating phenomenon, and I will talk more about this in future videos with different guests, the nature of the reality has expanded into scientific woo-woo, or so it was labeled, simply because science has become too closed-minded to include everything. Science has stopped being science. And I don't like saying that because I'm very much pro-science, but I mean the actual science, the one that's willing to look at everything and test everything, not prejudge it and say, oh, that's acceptable. Oh, no, that's not. That's woo-woo. Don't touch it. That's not the scientific enterprise that I was raised on. So I'm looking at everything, even if it's a deep, dark rabbit hole. And man, have I got some doozies. So stay tuned. Much more to come. Appreciate all of you and your support. I will catch up to you just as soon as I can.